Okay, this afternoon on a special Black Friday edition of the Relief Podcast, I welcome friend, leader, and CEO of EndoCanna, Len May. Len, welcome to the show.
Appreciate it, brother. Thank you.
I know Len for at least 15 years, and one thing that's great about you is your consistency. You're consistently happy, you're consistently joyous. What would you say brings you that smile, become your trademark?
I don't know if I'm consistently happy, and I appreciate you saying that. I think it's something you have to work at to know that your mood affects your life and other people as well. So when things happen and you get punched in the gut many times, it's not focusing on, it's like athletes. I hear this all the time. It's like the play happens, you have to forget the play and you have to move on to the next one. I sort of look at it that way also. What can I take out of that situation that's a learning experience? Not focus on the effect of it, focus on how it made me feel. What can I take out of it? What can I learn? And then push forward to the next step, what I can utilize that as a takeaway, as a lesson. It's always a work in progress because we always have things in our lives that give us a gut punch. What we can control is action oriented. The things that we can't control, if we focus on those things, that's when you start getting sad, depressed, and all those other things because you don't have any control over what actually happened. So I try to kind of come up with that attitude all the time.
People say pick up and move on. It's more of a accept what happened, whatever that is, right? Both are cases like a divorce, a loss, a change in life, right? A movement to somewhere else. And it's like when we hold on and have that's the resistance. And I think it's this journey of self-awareness that we all go on in groups and classes and on our own that leads us to these new frontiers of understanding ourselves and then the greater world from a different perspective, as opposed to just being in the situation. We observe it from a higher vantage point. What does that mean to you? When that you can shrink the problem, not eliminate it, but shrink its effect on us so that we can address it and be solution oriented?
I don't think everybody practices the work that it takes to get to feel comfortable with oneself. So this is a daily practice. And yes, things are going to happen in your life. Sometimes they happen and they hurt and it's inevitable, but to wallow in it is your choice. There has been a lot of things that happened in my life that in that moment seemed like it was devastating. And it may have been. And if I sit in it for a long time, there's no movement. You just sit in this dread. And the idea is that if you actually look at it in a way where you can expand and start working through the process, you'll be surprised that the thing that you thought that hurt the worst maybe was the biggest gift that you were granted in your life. But a lot of people don't want to put in the work. And this is a daily habit that you have to do. And you said self-awareness. I don't know if a lot of people are self-aware and also are closed off to feedback. I had this Vedic sort of reading last week, Ayurvedic Indian practice. I had a guy in the US and a guy in India that was translating things for me. And it was interesting because a lot of things were qualities that were taken energetically through your horoscope and your moon and your rising, a lot of stuff that I don't really understand, but I'm not going to say it's not true. It's not real. I'm accepting all these things, but they created these patterns, right? They were communicating these patterns that I may possess. Like just because I have certain traits and patterns, it doesn't mean that I'm going to take the action necessary to actually, like I do genetics. So I'm going to use that as an analogy to turn your epigenetic expression on or off. And this is where we have the power over ourselves that we may not think that we have. And I always struggle with this thing. Michael Singer wrote these books about untethered soul, about surrendering. And I always struggle about this whole surrender. Well, you surrender. Okay, well, if anybody's ever read this book, you completely surrender and you let the universe take over everything. I have a very hard time with that. I surrender certain things, and certain things I'm saying, I think I can take action against that. So you got to find what works for you. And that self-awareness is key, because being self-aware and being in tune with even what other people are saying is really, really important to growth. And growth is uncomfortable for some people. You got to feel comfortable being uncomfortable. And when you have sometimes in your life people that I had a conversation with somebody, it was inauthentic. And you go through life and you feel it. You feel that the conversations you start having with people are inauthentic. Well, you get to choose. This is not the surrender experiment. You get to choose, do I want these individuals in my life? Are they enhancing my life? Are they trying to take away from my life? And am I enhancing their life? So these are the decisions that I feel you are empowered to make, instead of just surrendering yourself to whatever happens. But that could also work for people. It just doesn't work for me.
I've read the same books. I love them both. And I think I've even seen clips where he was featured with Tony Robbins, and Tony's basically bowing before this master, right? Meaning in this realm, like, this is the master. This is the person who studied it for decades, and is the best teachers are the ones who can simplify their lessons so that more people can understand it. And when there's things I still don't let go of, like some of my properties in Philadelphia, right? Like, if I let them go, literally, then I'm free to live anywhere else and have a freedom lifestyle. It's being able to wake up one day and say, you know what, enough. Let somebody love my place as much as I don't love it anymore. And then you're free to be untethered and live anywhere you like, right? So you used to be on the East Coast. Talk about your journey and what brought you to not only the world of cannabis, but to lead movements, to lead healing and bringing kind of relief to many. And not only that, but just education, so that it's not just a recreational thing, but a true medical connection.
Yeah, I'll definitely talk about cannabis, but it's beyond that. The journey of life is an interesting journey that takes a lot of twists and turns. Like, I was born in Lithuania. I immigrated to the US when I was a kid, 6, 7 years old, as grew up in Philadelphia. Well, one of the things, like, as a kid, I had two parts of my brain that were working at different times. So I would sit in class and I would either daydream because I'm bored, I'm not stimulated, or I would be disruptive. And disruptive is like talking. I needed that connection all the time. When you find what your purpose is, you start going backwards and saying, oh, that's why, that's why. So one of the things that was proposed to me by other people, and then I try to accept it myself, purpose. So there's a purpose of connection and contribution. This is what drives me, connection and contribution. So as I'm engaging through life, am I connecting? Am I contributing? But going back to what I was saying as a kid, so that connection of being disruptive and contributing in some way where I wasn't finding it, I wasn't getting the dopamine that I needed. And what I found out later, I was diagnosed with ADD. So apparently there's a neurochemistry that I'm deficient in dopamine production. That's why your brain is always looking for the next squirt of dopamine. And if you're being stimulated, you can hyper focus. But if you're not, your brain, that's why you have these squirrel moments. You're always looking for the next squirt of dopamine. So they put me on prescription meds. And I can't say they didn't really work, but they took away the feeling of self from me. So that emotional connection to self, you walk through life as a zombie. And I see it's very easy for psychopharmacologists to prescribe this to kids all day, every day, all the time. I can get into treatment-resistant depression, all that other stuff. But are there other things that you can do? So in that journey, I discovered cannabis for myself, gave up my prescription medication, and saw that this was my medicine. Not all of it worked the same way, by the way. It's a complex plant. Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes it makes you laugh. Sometimes it actually goes inward, and to me, it's a psychedelic plant. There's neurochemistry that is expressed from that plant. So you're having a psychedelic experience. Setting is really important in that psychedelic journey with cannabis, like any other substance like that. So my parents didn't like that, and ended up, like, I was getting in trouble. They ended up kicking me out when I was in my late teens, actually calling the cops to have me arrested first. And when the cops didn't arrest me just throughout my cannabis and all that stuff, my dad continued. I remember there's two female officers, and the one said, if it was my son, I would just kick him in the curb. And my dad literally did. The good news about this whole thing is that I speak to my parents, my dad, every day, and that they take formulations that my company has patents on for their conditions. So it all came full circle in a way. But the activism part, everything that happens, like you think it's an accident, but it's not. It's there for you sort of as an Easter egg. It sits there and you can walk by it, but you need to be aware of the opportunities that are presented to you because you walk by those opportunities. So another long story, I'll try to make it shorter, but I got a job at Tower Records. I just graduated high school. I was graduating high school and I was going to university. I started at Temple University. I was going to Temple University. I needed to pay for my education. I'm homeless. I was living in motel rooms for a while. Then I was crashing with my girlfriend. I was couch surfing at different friends, and everybody is like, it's enough. You got to go thing. So my grandmother at that time was able to give me a deposit to get an apartment. I had a shitty apartment in Philly with roaches everywhere. And every time it would rain, it was in the basement. So half my apartment would flood and I have water in the carpet. I had to suck it up with a shop vac and smell like mold, but whatever, it's mine. But I still have to pay for it. So I was a big music person. So I would Tower Records all the time anyway. And one of the guys there was like, hey, we have an opening. So I was a cashier. Then I became a music buyer for a while. But in doing that, I get invited to different events. So you make $7 an hour at that time, but you get, so I got invited to this thing called the Horde Festival, HORDE. It was a festival where Blues Traveler, Ziggy Marley, the Black Crowes were playing. I'm like, yeah, great. So you get these freebie perks. And there was a group of, I saw banners at the CannabisAction Network. So it's a group of kids, they're registering people to vote. And I was like, cool, they're legal for legalization, all that stuff. I'm like, what are you guys doing? Registering people to vote. I'm like, what else? And that was it. So I became the president of the CannabisAction Network at some point. And I held a rally at Independence Hall in Philadelphia where the Constitution Declaration is on hemp paper. And my keynote speaker, this woman named Elvie Masika, she was one of the first people to get federally prescribed cannabis under a NIDA program they had for her degenerative glaucoma. And everybody crashed in my house. And the next morning, we got woken up to a loud noise. And Elvie happened to walk into a sculpture that I had in my house. And she didn't see it. She broke it. And she felt so bad. And then she was medicating with cannabis, which alleviated her muscles so she could see. And I was like, it's fine. But I started realizing, I'm like, well, cannabis is working for me for my ADD symptoms. It's working for her for glaucoma. What an interesting plant. How can that be? You can't take one medicine from anybody and have it affect different conditions. So I started really diving in and trying to learn as much as I possibly could about the science of the endocannabinoid system and the cannabinoid plants themselves. So that was the beginning of my journey into cannabis. And then I can expand on personalized health and wellness if you would like.
Oh, please do. I think it's essential to demystify what's out there, because I think right now there's such a Wild West proliferation of shops, of industries, of going from medical to recreational. And here, still in Philly, people literally cross the bridges, right, to go to Jersey because it's recreational there. And in Pennsylvania, you can't have a gun and buy cannabis. Right, so they have to send somebody else to get their stuff, and then there's no personalized customer service of, hey, what is your condition, what do you need, what do you need that might fit this, rather than, oh, this is good and that's good. Well, your definition of good and my definition of good may not be the same, because we literally have different endocannabinoid systems. And if you would please go into that and the solution that you offer that will help clarify what people need.
Yeah, throughout my journey, I always wanted to do something in cannabis, but because of the legalities, I had to get real jobs. I went to work for Price Waterhouse, and then I was a consultant for a venture capital company. And then I worked in a company called Cognizant Technology Solutions, on-site offshore development, and I ended up making pretty good money investing in real estate. So I would invest in real estate, and I remember, like, It was pre-construction in like Florida, and I made some money. I remember telling my ex-wife, I want to do real estate. She's like, I can't see you driving around showing houses to people. I'm like, not like that. I want to do something like commercial, but I didn't even know if you need a different license for that or not. So I left my job and went to work for a commercial real estate company, first, a really small one in Lansdale. Learned a lot, was a gas station expert. That was my area of expertise because I just fell into it. And the guy's like, find a niche. So I'm like, I'm going to do gas stations. I was a gas station guy, which are not easy deals to do because you have environmentals, all these other things that you don't know, and then move into retail. And then I remember I was doing a deal with this guy, Joe, and he brought his buyers for property, industrial property they had that we're going to convert. And he's like, hey, I said, Joe, let me handle the deal. You get your commission. Don't worry about it. I'm a commercial guy. So he goes, yeah, but great. Do you have 15 minutes to meet with me and my broker and grab a cup of coffee or something like that? I didn't know there was the Keller Williams sort of model of recruiting at that time, but it became that. And they asked me if I can be like the managing director of the commercial division. So I was a commercial guy. And then I was like, well, I'm going to build a team and make commercial group. I'm going to do that. What else can I do? Get my broker license. I'm going to be a broker. So I did all that. And I thought this was, I'm getting to a point of passion. I thought this is what I loved. And I did, but when I really looked and scrutinized it, I loved the transaction. The transaction itself was like my hit of heroin, was my dopamine hit. I loved it. And afterwards, I was like, it goes away. And I got to search for that again. And it's like, am I connecting? Am I contributing? Well, yeah, in a way, I'm connecting and I'm contributing. But what am I contributing? I'm contributing to wealthy people getting more wealthy. And how is that making a difference in people's lives? I don't know. Maybe it is and it isn't, but it didn't feel satisfactory. So my ex-wife was an actress and we would go to LA a lot. And then at some point, she's like, well, we have to move here. So I moved her and my daughter and part of my family. I was going back and forth for a year. I had a whole team in Philly. It was a pretty decent real estate business, but I wanted to see my daughter. So at one point, I just put my house up for sale, got a realtor, and my business, everything, and just moved. And after a short period of time, we ended up separating. I got my own place, and took a couple of years to get divorced. In the meantime, I wasn't sure what I was going to do. And because people knew me in the real estate space, they allowed me to sit in a Keller Williams office, even though it's not a reciprocal state. And I wasn't sure, but I could still, quote unquote, consult and help with real estate transactions. So these guys came in and they wanted to open up an alternative pharmacy. And the realtor there was like, I don't really know what these guys want, work with them. So came over and said, what do you guys want? This and that. I said, oh, what do you really want? Open up a dispensary.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, all right, cool, man. I'm in. I can help you.
Mm-hmm.
Where's your paperwork? You have to be compliant. There was SB 420, Prop 215. There's all this paperwork. You have to be a not-for-profit entity, all these different rules. They didn't know what I was talking about. So I helped them and they offered me a partnership. So we ended up using this sort of Keller Williams model where you're flying the same flag, but people manage the different business. So we ended up opening 5 of them, 5 dispensaries on the same brand called Kush Kingdom. And one of the things I started noticing over time is people would consume the same chemical variety of phytocannabinoids and have a completely different experience. And then going back to what I was saying with Elvie, it's the same thing. Like it affects me different than it affected her. So how does it work? So taking a deep dive first in the endocannabinoid system, I can, if you would like, I can
Please
explain
do.
what that is.
Go into it. I love
Yeah.
as much detail as you can share.
Yeah, so the endocannabinoid system is our primary modulating system in our bodies. It was discovered by Dr. Raphael Mechoulam in 1992. He's an Israeli scientist, passed away a couple of years ago. And, if you went to medical school prior to that, they didn't teach you the endocannabinoid system. They barely teach it to you now. And the way that it works is a really fascinating system because it gets signals from the other system, from your endocrine system, from your immune system, etc., and sends it up the central nervous system, like salmon swing upstream to your brain. And your brain makes the decision which neurochemicals that are endogenous to us to release to get that other system back in balance, or what's called homeostasis. And the two endogenous endocannabinoids, which is what we produce ourselves in the brain, are called anandamide. The word anandamide, the word ananda means bliss in Sanskrit. So this is our bliss molecule. So that's released, and the other one is called 2AG. There's a long name for it. So I just use the acronym 2AG. You can Google what the pronunciation of that is. But basically, the way it works is when we have an imbalance in our endocannabinoid system, let's say there's a stressful event, and you have all these different stress molecules are pumped in your bloodstream. You have your dopamine, adrenaline, norepinephrine, cortisol. Well, when the lion is not chasing the jungle, your brain realizes that there's a reuptake of those neurochemicals, and your brain releases those new neurochemicals, as I mentioned, anandamide and also 2AG. Well, if your own endocannabinoid system is not producing enough endogenous endocannabinoids, or you have a genetic predisposition where you break down that endogenous endocannabinoid quicker, so you're actually not getting enough of it, well, that cortisol can stay longer in your bloodstream. And what happens to a lot of people is, first of all, it can lower your pH level, make you more acidic. You can have an overactive immune response. We all know what cytokine is during COVID. Your immune system actually is overreacting to something in your body. And if you feel that because your cortisol level is there, is thinking something is wrong, you're going to feel inflammation. You're going to feel inflammation and pain, discomfort, usually in your joints. It starts with your ankles, knees, hips, neck, back, anything that's movable. And if you have predisposition to gut health issues, it can actually go into your gut health and trigger things like IBD, etc. So the good news is that because we all have our own endocannabinoid system, and we all have our own endogenous endocannabinoids, that deficiency that you may have personally, that can be subsidized by phytocannabinoids from the plant. So it's the only thing that we've found so far in nature that provides the phytocannabinoids that bind to receptors that we have, and I'll explain that as well, and allows you to subsidize what you're naturally deficient in. So as we evolve as human beings for millions of years, there's systems that we evolve out of. Like maybe there was a need for an appendix way back then, but we don't need it anymore. So we just remove it. And there's other things. But the endocannabinoid system receptors have evolved with us for thousands and thousands and thousands of years. So we have these CB1 receptors, which are located mostly in our brain and central nervous system. And we have our CB2 receptors, which are mostly in our immune, digestive system, etc. So when we consume the plant in its decarboxylated form, which is heated from the plant that grows, when you heat it or you apply heat and pressure to it, there's an acid molecule with the plant. When it grows, the acid molecule falls off, and now you have a perfect molecule with three prongs that bind to receptors that have three areas of connection. When you have this perfect connection, it releases anandamide, your endogenous endocannabinoid. CBD is a little bit different in that you have CB2 receptors, which are in your immune, digestive system, etc. When you consume CBD in its deep carboxylated form, it has an affinity for those two CB2 receptors and releases more of that 2AG. Anti-inflammatory, while anandamide is psychoactive. It gives you that euphoric feeling. And by the way, when you get the runner's high, that's also releasing anandamide. So you're feeling that all the time when we get excited and happy, etc. So being able to address specifically what people actually need, that's started to be my passion. I got into plant genetics first to try to understand. We're calling these quote unquote strains or chemical varieties or chemovars, all these names that have no meaning whatsoever. You have to look at the chemistry of the plant. You have to look at the genetics of the plant, what cannabinoids it has. You have to look at the terpenes of that plant, which are the essential oil the plant produces that give it smell, and the combination of both and how it affects you. That's sort of the personalized experience. And I launched my company. It's EndoDNA 2017. And the first 6 months, all we did was research. We looked at every single genetic biomarkers directly or indirectly associated with your endocannabinoid system. Once we did that, we created our kits, a saliva test. You swab the inside your cheek, You register that information. We're HIPAA and GDPR compliant. You ship that to our lab. You get a report. Well, the report is not about, let me find the best cannabis is going to be get me high or hang out with my friends and laugh and all that shit. It's not about that. It's about trying to avoid or mitigate a possible adverse event. So it's looking at your genetic predispositions. If you have a predisposition to anxiety, PTSD, or if you have predisposition to depressive states or sleep issues, or you have some side effects that are related, that may be related to some of the phytocannabinoids. It also looks at drug-to-drug interaction. Some of the medications that somebody may be on may have an adverse event when they're combined with cannabinoids too. And I think most importantly is dosing. We are all individuals, and it was all like doctors tell you, take 2 of these and call me in the morning. Well, why am I taking 2? Why am I not taking 4? Why am I not taking 1? Well, it has to do a lot with how we metabolize and looking at your metabolic function, combining all those together to find your sort of secret sauce. Now you can go into a dispensary, you can go to the marketplace on our site or anywhere else, and you know, this is my secret sauce, or these are my cannabinoid formulations and products that may align better with me, and I can avoid these other ones that may trigger a possible adverse event. And so that's how it works. And you bookend the experience, because not only do we have a patent on the endocannabinoid system test, the use of DNA to make recommendations associated with the endocannabinoid system, we have a machine learning algorithm patent. We have 8 different patents and formulations that we know they're efficacious for different conditions, but we expanded outside of that space for precision health and wellness. Because I'm a huge believer, and everybody should be, that medicine and therapeutics and wellness and health is a personal experience. So for people to, everybody should know what their genetic predispositions are to anything. This is your life's GPS. You should know where your own potholes are in your own road. Once you know where they are, you can take action. By the way, you can still do whatever you want to do as long as you have the knowledge that you're going to step into a pothole. If you willingly, with full intent and knowledge, are going to step into the pothole, that's on you. You made that choice. But if you're driving blindly, then that's a different choice. I can drive from LA to Philadelphia without a GPS. I'm going to get lost. I'm going to hit potholes. I'm going to have traffic jams. I'm going to get there eventually, but at what cost? But I have a GPS unit. It'll tell me that avoid these roads and it'll get me there. This is where knowing your genetics comes in. The second thing that you need to do is you need to look at what a personalized protocol looks like for you. So for Demetri, it could be different than from Len. So you have a partnership with your healthcare professional. Instead of having this hierarchy, you have a partnership. You're collaborating together for your own personal health and wellness. And the last part of that is the feedback loop. Well, now that you have a protocol, how is that working for me? What is my epigenetic expression of those things? What did I turn on? What did I turn off? Maybe looking at my biological age and seeing if I'm reducing that biological age by the actions that I'm taking. So it's bookending that full experience and creating that personalized health and wellness protocol.
You touched on a lot of like there's a lot of like ding 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 moments for myself, like anxiety check, PTSD check, depression check, like yeah, sleep definitely big check, and being able to optimize yourself as a full human, right? Like you said, carry that equanimity and full emotional control. And for someone like myself who has social anxiety, sometimes get stressed. Like I was at a Black Friday sale, right? Not running, just trying to get a camera, right? And I'm sitting there, I'm like, there are people here. No one's a threat. But somehow your insides are like, what am I doing here? What's going on? I'm a little stressed. But if you have like medicine, right, that you can rely on, it's not habit forming, just natural, occurring, and personalized. I feel like that's giving people more certainty as opposed to try this and might help you.
Yeah, but there's also no like magic bullet. And what I mean by that is understanding why you have the expression that you have now. What's causing that? Using cannabis as a crutch to be able to mask the underlying symptoms is also, it's like anything, like coffee, sugar, anything else. So combining that, they talk about set and setting, and we just finished a clinical study at Wayne State on PTSD and cannabis and the role that it can play in an adolescent brain. Not always the most positive experience with PTSD. For some people, it works. Like I remember, I was a painful injury, and I was trying to numb the pain by taking cannabis. And what it was doing, it was actually exacerbating that. The feeling of the pain was more. So it actually did the opposite for me. Once again, it's something that it's telling me that I have to deal with. And that's where you have the ability to take action. You know, stress is also, there's genetic markers for stress reactivity. Some people have these predispositions and certain things trigger that. When you're consuming cannabis, and specifically delta 9 THC, has a very narrow therapeutic window. So when you take the amount that's just right for you, that's therapeutic. You got it, and now you can work through that journey. Sometimes it's the opposite. Too much of that does the opposite. It can trigger stress reactivity, it can trigger PTSD. So you have to find the right amount for you, the right kind, the right dose, and all those other things. But in addition to that, it's also the reintegration of that. So participating in like ketamine therapy, and I've seen this so many times with people, once your receptors, once your synapse, and once your neurotransmitters are creating new neural pathways while you're on ketamine, that's wonderful. When you're off, well, reintegration is key because you're going to revert back. There is still an anchor, right? So you may change the trigger point, but the anchor is still there. You have to work on what is anchoring you to that feeling, not just getting rid of the trigger points because they'll keep shifting. So yes, social anxiety is a huge one, but it's also sort of nature versus nurture. We always believe that we're born with these genetics, and it's true. We get 50% from our mother, 50% from our father, but maybe about 20, 30% of our genes are set in stone, our skin color, hair color, eye color. The rest of the things we can control the epigenetic expression based on lifestyle. And if something occurred in your childhood, if something occurred later in life that triggered that expression, that turned the switch on, it doesn't mean that you can't turn that switch off or down. And understanding this about yourself and knowing that you're empowered to turn those switches on or off, lifestyle choices. So, what food am I going to put in my body? What are the nutrients that I'm going to give to myself? What are my own neurochemicals? So, if I have more serotonin that I can activate, more oxytocin, more love, well, guess what? That cortisol that's being secreted through stress goes away. So you have to understand yourself and take specific action. And like I said before, being comfortable feeling uncomfortable. We're creatures of habit and we're creatures of comfort. It's very easy to say, like today, after this big Thanksgiving Day meal, man, I'm going to go to the gym. But you know what? I feel so much better sitting at home on my couch. It just feels natural. I do want to go to the gym because I ate so much pumpkin pie and turkey yesterday and all this stuff, but I'm not going to, it's just hard to get myself to do that. So connecting yourself to the outcome of purpose of what you can do to reward yourself, that's being able to do that. And you have to know yourself. And as you said, very, very, it's very important to be self-aware. You know what motivates you. So I don't love the gym. And gym is fine. I like it. But if I connect this, I say, at the end of the gym, I'm going to go to the sauna.
Mm-hmm.
And I love the sauna. So I'm going to the gym to put in the work so I can reward myself with sitting in the sauna.
Mm-hmm.
These are the things that we need to know what motivates us to get our asses off the couch and take specific action.
Just to add to that, in my own experience, yesterday was Thanksgiving, so the gym is closed. But Hot Works is open, right there on Grand Avenue, not too far off from where we used to work at Cal Williams. And I just log in, I go in there, I do my workout, and sometimes it's not the best workout, but it's something. It's effort, it's forward momentum. And today, to get into the best state I could for you and for the listeners, I went to LA Fitness. I worked out as best I could, right? And then the sauna, or as we call it, the schwitz. That was
Exactly.
right. Again, I'm not Yiddish, but I know a few words. So that's schwitz. That can be sometimes 20 minutes in a row or 10 minutes broken up into two, right? I think Huberman talks about it. Like if you do that 2, 3 times a week, your chances of a heart attack go down. And in the last few years, people have so much stress, so many reasons. You don't even have to go into all the reasons. It's almost a collective reason that we need to ground ourselves, push ourselves, and to shake out those emotions that might just be stuck in us, right?
Mhm.
Through physical workout, tearing down our muscle fibers and rebuilding, and then relaxing by putting intense heat on ourselves, right? So, how long have you had physical fitness as a priority in your life, and how has it shaped you into the leader you are now?
Always, as far as I can remember, but it changes. I'm in my 50s. So the physical fitness I used to have as a kid, like as a kid, you're growing up as a latchkey kid in Philly. Your parents both work. You take the bus to school. You come home by yourself. You make yourself a snack. You grab your bike and you ride with your friends. And you're always doing physical activity, or you pull out the cardboard and you start breakdancing on the street with your boombox because that's the thing that you want to do, or you play street hockey with your friends and basketball. Always physical activities, always sports, and always that. Nothing majorly organized. But I remember when I moved into my second apartment, my best friend came to live with me as my roommate. He needed a place to crash, and he ended up like staying for a while. But he would play hockey all the time, and we put a gym downstairs in our basement. And I was taking weight gainers. I was so skinny, I could not gain weight at all. So I'm trying to work out to gain weight so I can build muscle, and nothing's working no matter what I eat, and just rapid metabolism. But that changes as you get older. Your
Um,
metabolism slows down. So I don't have the same problem anymore. So the workout became different. And then the thing I think that also is really important, you got to find what you enjoy. And I took Stephen Kotler's flow class. I highly recommend just understanding flow. We all have it when our neurochemistry is optimal, where we're operating at our highest level. An example of that is a basketball player that's in flow can't miss. The basket is like a swimming pool. You can shoot from anywhere, just going in. You're in flow. You're not thinking, you're feeling. So finding that flow state and replicating that is important. For me, I realized after taking that class that it's hiking. So, and it could be other things, but it's one of those. I started realizing that when I turn off, I allow things to download instead of me trying to force a situation. So, as I'm hiking, first of all, I'm in nature. I'm exuding physical activity. I'm walking. But what happens is because I'm not thinking, I'm being, the ideas, if I'm stuck, they just start downloading in my head. I always have my phone with me after my hike. I'm like, I'm taking notes. I'm like, where did this come from? It was always there. It's just a download. And that's when you're operating in peak flow state. You have these, so understanding what that is and being able to have physical activity in your life. As I said, the schwitz, the working out, I can't just hike. I can, but for me, I think about muscle mass, and you have to do that as you're getting older because bones get more brittle. You have to create some muscle mass in you. So I don't love that, but I reward myself. And if I say to myself, I'm going to do physical activity, I'm going to go work out, I'm going to do this and that, and after the fact, tomorrow I'm going to go on a hike. Great. My dog is happy. I'm happy. And I was able to create that balance. So, really understanding what it is that motivates you, that gets you off. If your motivation is not high enough, if you're going to say, listen, I just need to lose 10 pounds because I need to fit into this dress or something like that, you don't have the intrinsic long lasting motivation that can actually help you sustain that. It's always this thing where somebody makes a New Year's resolution The parking lot in January at the gym, LA Fitness. I go to LA Fitness. I've been a member since Bally days. It's packed. February rolls around, 3/4 packed. You're in March and April. Oh shit, the parking lot's empty again. No problem. All those people bail. So this is the thing that you have to be able to motivate yourself, to sustain yourself, and it's that whole big reason why. We always talk about why. Get your why in check, and I think that'll help you.
Oh yeah, for me, a why is to be more impactful, right, and to be a powerful creator and connector, right? Which I know you are as well, right? But if you're not healthy, if you're carrying out another 20 pounds, you can't do that hike. you know?
Well, you can, but you'll do it slowly. But that's for you. It's so funny you brought that up because I always find hypocrisy be hysterical. It cracks me up because you go to, I remember I was meeting with this doctor. It wasn't for me. And this doctor was so overweight and he was having a conversation and he walked out. He wanted to talk to me about like what we're doing in business. And he lit up a cigarette. And I was like, you're a doctor, you're overweight, and you're smoking. I'm sorry, I cannot take you. And maybe it's me, but to me it's hypocrisy. And it cracks me up because if you're gonna tell somebody, if I'm gonna tell somebody, live a life of service, live a life of contribution, and be healthy, and I'm not doing it myself, I'm a hypocrite. I'm a guinea pig for everything I do. If it's microbiome testing, I'm going to go and do microbiome testing on myself. I'm going to say, this is what I did. This is what worked. Genetic testing, I do it on myself. I do everything on myself. So I'm my own guinea pig. And the only way that I'm going to be able to make a recommendation for people is if I do it myself. My company now shifted its focus on B2B. So we're a B2B company. We work with healthcare professionals. Like we have our menopause biotype test for female hormone health. A huge, huge challenge for women. My mom was telling me, like, if she knew this about herself back when, she could have had an easier time. And my dad could have had an easier time with her menopause. Perimenopause, menopause, postmenopause, understanding what your genetic predispositions to the adverse effects there and mitigating it in advance, that's extremely important. Male hormone health, nutrigenomics, which nutrients am I deficient in personally, not just in a blood test, because that's a moment in time, but over time. Looking at things like skin, what skin conditions am I predisposed to? What can I do to mitigate the expression of that? We even have a canine test. But the point I'm trying to make is we work with healthcare professionals or veterinarians, et cetera, and people are still coming to us and saying, can you work with me one-on-one? Can you actually review my DNA results? Can you make some recommendations? So I'm launching my old practice back again, associated with EndoDNA, which is Len May coaching. And the reason why, it's just a domain that I always had, I always find coaching to be such an interesting word because it's so overused. I couldn't think of it as, if any of your listeners have a better way to describe what I do, but it's basically going over, getting a DNA test, going over the DNA test results, making some suggestions, recommendations, getting some products, going over, seeing how those products are working for individuals, connecting with healthcare professionals. So you're really getting a true personalized journey for your health and wellness. And that's what I feel like I'm destined to do as well. I miss that kind of thing because being a CEO of the company, having the feedback of what it is that you have been doing for people is the why I'm doing this. And when you're caught up in business and corporate and agreements and deals, you forget the reason why. When I was in Brazil, they invited me to speak and I got this award and it was wonderful and it's great. And I'm super grateful for it. But there was a line of people lined up to speak to me, and most of them don't speak English with a translator. And the gratitude that I received like made me cry. This woman, she came with her daughter in a wheelchair, heavily on the spectrum, was nonverbal, non-communicative at all. And after doing her DNA test and she told me, taking the test and getting some products, not only is she able to speak here and there, but her eyes change. I have them before and after. The way that she can communicate with her eyes. She's engaged. It's such a huge difference. And this guy came with his mother. She had a walker, I think, but she could not stand up. She would always be sitting wheelchair bound. She was able to walk. She's like, she's cooking for me again. She's happy. Look, she's got a smile on her face. And this is the reason why we do what we do, because at the end of the day, yes, it's a business. We're all in business. We all need to make money. We all need to be able to pay our bills and all this stuff. But the why is that. That's the contribution. That's what fulfills you. And when you have this exchange with people of energy, I'm doing for you, you're benefiting from that. You're telling me it benefited you. It's giving me back. And this is the communication that we all would desire to have to fulfill our own bucket, so we can give that back to other people. You brought up Tony Robbins. He says that all the time. He goes, fine, I'm selfish. I want to help people because I feel good when I do that. Great. That's the exchange of energy. I want to do the same thing.
No, you're basically by healing others, that fills your cup.
That's it. That's it. It's exactly that.
Like, what do you make of, let's say, we're going to have a new administration, a new priority of health and human services, and likely Robert Kennedy is going to be leading that. Do you think that cannabis will be first decriminalized, right? Move to a new schedule. And then where do you think policy will meet practicality?
Well, first of all, as far as RFK goes and the administration, I'm a big supporter of that. I'm not really a political person. There's certain things that I feel very strongly about, and I've been an independent registered voter for most of my life. So I choose the party that I want to vote for. But this is really, really important. We have, I think, over 30 known chemicals that are permitted in our food that is banned in Europe and other places in the world. It's ridiculous. At the very least, get our food to be real food. So that's part one. So I'm very, very bullish on that. And I really believe that that'll be some changes that are going to impact people positively. We have a system in the United States that's broken that I'm not sure how to fix. And that system is the pharmaceutical model and the insurance model, which is the biggest subscription service in the world. We're the only country that has this system. And the reason why it's a system that's broken and flawed, the system is not about getting people healthy. It's about getting people's symptoms that are feeling addressed, so you can get on the subscription model of the pharmaceutical drug companies. Your elbow hurts, we have something for that. Well, guess what? That's causing me some other pain. We have something for the side effects. It's an ongoing system that needs to be fixed. And I'm not sure how to fix it. I have some ideas. And RFK, if you're listening, I'd love to collaborate. Let's work on it together, because that needs to be fixed. As far as cannabis goes, look, it's complex, and the pharmaceutical industry makes it more complex too, because they have a really hard time figuring out a multi-dimensional plan, because they're used to single molecule solutions. And we do have one product, Epidiolex, now owned by Jazz Pharmaceuticals for childhood epilepsy Dravet syndrome, that went for FDA approval, but that's it. So can there be other products? Yes, but the challenge is the pharmaceutical model is extraction chemicals, maybe 2 chemicals, being able to take those and connect them to a specific disease or condition, showing that is safe, it's somewhat efficacious, the side effects are minimal, and then you can scale that. And that's when you get through FDA approval. With cannabis, it makes it really difficult. So the proposal, I'll tell you what I would like to have done and what I think is going to happen. So what is going to happen, I think, is rescheduling. And rescheduling is not removing prohibition, which is what I would suggest. And I'll explain that in a minute. Rescheduling to Schedule 3 or 4 creates a new class of drug which will be cannabis, and maybe the percentage of THC may guide that. But sometimes you can come into a pharmacy and get your allergy medicine that doesn't have a cure for anything. It's like a nutraceutical type of thing, may alleviate symptoms of your cold or may alleviate symptoms of allergies. But you have to go to the pharmacist, show your ID that you're over the age to get that and get that product. So it's not necessarily a prescription that somebody wrote, but you still have to be qualified to be able to receive that. So Schedule 3 and 4 can allow that for a nutraceutical type of product that has multiple ingredients in it. The thing that I think is positive on that end is that at least we'll have a consistency of products. The federal government's oversight over testing and consistency. I can get a multivitamin in LA. I can get the same exact multivitamin in Philly. I don't have to worry about it. The ingredients are all there. We don't have that right now. All the products are all over the place. We don't have any of that stuff. So at least it'll have a consistent layer of oversight by the FDA that your ingredients, what you buy in a dispensary, in a pharmacy, will be identical, which is key. The second thing is, from a business standpoint, the removal of 280E, which allows businesses to thrive a little bit more, because in the cannabis business, you don't have the same tax code. You can't write off like your rent and all, like any other business. So you're basically being taxed twice. The prices have to elevate and you pass on that to the consumer, and cannabis becomes expensive. So people go to the black market because it's much cheaper, where they can get, not good quality products, where then people get sick and all these other things. So that's the other negative part about it. But for me, if somebody would ask me, hey, policy wise, we already have a policy. The policy has been in place since the lifting of prohibition. There was alcohol prohibition in the United States. Prohibition was lifted, which meant that the federal government says it's not illegal. We will regulate, but we'll also allow the states to create their own laws around it. So there are, like Pennsylvania had a liquor control board that says you can't buy your vodka in a 7-Eleven. You have to go to a state store. The tri-state area of New Jersey, New York, Connecticut, they have different laws and they have different trade among them. So it goes over state. So there is a system that's already been in place. It's already proven. It's been there. But I don't think we're going to get there. I think the model is going to be what I mentioned, rescheduling, being able to sell higher THC products in a pharmaceutical environment, and lower THC products will be like a nutraceutical type of offering. That's what I feel.
And I think it's a natural progression of where things are going, in that it's proliferated. And then instead of just having a run to quantity, you have an attraction to quality. Like when people here on the East Coast say, oh, when I go to Arizona or Colorado or California, it's just a default that it's going to be better. Right? But that could just be in our heads, right? Would you mind speaking on like how people can need to look out for GMO inconsistency? Sometimes people vape now and it's synthetic cannabis, right? What to look out for, because we both probably are aware of the work of Dr. Sebi, and he would probably go and say, only smoke that which has seeds. Just like only eat watermelon that has seeds, right? Like you don't want to eat GMO food as much as you possibly can. Talk about what to look out for and how to read your labels, if that makes sense, and to know if it's synthetic or natural that you're purchasing.
Well, I'll talk about the seed thing. Monsanto is in the cannabis business. They're in the cannabis seed business. They're in the big ag business. So are other companies, like the big tobacco companies. They've converted a lot of their crops to hemp, as they used to have in the past. And there's cannabis cultivation involved there as well. No, you don't have to have seeds in order for your cannabis not to be GMO'd. You flower your plant with a mother plant. You avoid the male, and then you have seedlings, cuttings from that you will grow that will not have seeds in them, because if you have a seed, it'll impregnate the male plant, the female plant. You're gonna have seeds all the way around, and you want to have female plants that are produced. They don't have seeds, which doesn't change the quality of the plant. However, there are genetically modified seeds as well. The company, like I mentioned, Monsanto, Bayer, etc., they make those. I'm not sure if just because it's been genetically edited that it is a GMO negatively impacting products. You can actually have crosses of different cannabinoid varietals that you can cross in a lab and generate a seed from that. Is that genetically edited? Yes, genetically edited for consistency, but it doesn't mean that you're modifying it in a certain way that may actually cause harm in your body. Having said that, we'll talk about vaping. Well, if you're taking, back in the day, this is what we used to do to make concentrates. We take a hair straightener. I used to have long hair, so I had a hair straightener. It wasn't for me. I'm just kidding. But you have a hair straightener. You put some parchment paper on that. You take a bud of cannabis. You put that on. You squeeze it, which then creates heat and pressure, and it creates a concentrated oil. So you decarboxylate it. You actually now have cannabis. Back in the day, maybe had 10% THC, give or take. Back in the, before that, it even had 5%. Now, I was just getting flower. It was 37% THC with no infusion. This is the way it was cultivated. We grow for THC. We modify the plant to express as much THC as possible. Remember, very narrow therapeutic window. Is there a need for that high of THC? I doubt it. But maybe for some people who are suffering from a lot of aches and pains, there's even 99% THC. It's called the clear, which is exceptionally intense as an experience, but I don't highly recommend it for people unless they want to have that type of experience. So vaping itself, if you're taking the what I just described, a plant, you heat it, you put pressure on it, you have the oil from that plant, you put it into a vaporizer that heats at a certain temperature, that's temperature controlled, and you heat that plant to the same way that you would heat it when you smoke it in a rolled cigarette joint or whatever. Then you take that vapor, and it's the vapor that's natural from the plant. And I don't think there is an issue with that. The issue that we have now is the isolated molecules and the concentrates that we make. We don't make it the same way. We isolate those molecules, put them into usually a cheap vape pen that heats up the coil, heats up that oil to a certain temperature where it's not the same consistent temperature as you would heat up the actual cannabis cigarette. And what happens, there's a couple of things that happen. Number one, it can convert some of those terpenes to substances that maybe I don't want to say poisonous, but it definitely can affect you negatively because they're definitely going to be negatively impactful substances. They convert to different substances that weren't supposed to be that, and some of them dissipate. They just burn away at that high temperature. So you're not getting the full effect that you wanted to get in the first place. And so you got to be really careful when you're vaping and what you're putting in your body. And that's why I'm saying the consistency of federal oversight of what it is that should or should not be in your products. There's additives, there's all kinds of different things. And you said genetically modified, synthetics, all these things. And if you're getting in the black market, you definitely have to be careful of vapes in the black market. So having test results, make sure that whatever you're purchasing has test results. It has a certificate of analysis. Ask for it. It must have that. Scan it. Look at it. Make sure it passed all the pesticides, heavy metals, all these things. We're putting those in our bodies. And if we don't know that, going back to the epigenetic expression, those are the things that affect the epigenetic expression of your genetic predispositions. So these are the ways that we can mitigate having those adverse experiences.
Wow. I mean, because, a lot of times when going back to visiting some of these stores and saying, oh, this variety helps with, and they'll just list a whole series of conditions. And you're like, oh, that works for me and that works for me. And then I'm going to try it. And maybe it's like this placebo effect that you think the first round is going to help you and then you're good. And then you're like, but it has a contra effect. And if it's chemically synthesized, and like you said, and these auto draw cartridges, these cheap cartridges, they're just heating things up, right?
Yep.
And like you mentioned, the black market. When I started my journey 10 years ago, I think some of these items had vitamin E in them, which would cause like a dark oil effect, and then people would be getting like popcorn lung, or there would be this fear of it, and I think when younger and younger people are getting like lung issues, stress, and they're going, like you said, further into the medicine, more like you said, with a dosage that's more than necessary, thinking that it's going to help them heal, but actually might cause harm. I think that's the moment when people need to slow down, like you said, address the root issues of what causes them to go for the plant medicine, and
Mhm.
then get the proper testing. Like, I guess it's time for me to finally get my proper test. But I've always been an advocate and recommending what you have for others, because for the cost of that test, it's one trip to the store,
Yeah.
right? Literally.
Yeah. Well, knowing what to put in your body is really important. Like I said, cannabis, but anything. You also brought up an interesting point about THC. When you're younger, you're looking at the percentage of THC. Oh man, for the money, I'm going to get 40% THC versus 20% THC. But do you really need it? Your receptors get bound. You may need to increase the amount that you're getting anyway. The interesting thing about cannabis is it's one of the only drugs that the receptors reset themselves. So you can take a pause and the receptors reset. So you don't have that feeling of your brain chemistry has changed. Your brain chemistry changes with other drugs like opioids or things like cocaine, etc. But with cannabis, it actually the receptors can reset themselves. So it's understanding the indications. And look, it's our fault and the government's fault. Firstly, you can't say this is going to relieve these conditions and these conditions. You're not supposed to say those kind of things because we don't know. For some people, as I said, for some people it can turn it on. So for some people it can turn it down. And there's no consistency in products, or very little consistency in products from state to state, from dispensary to dispensary, from crop to crop. And one of those reasons is it's a living, breathing plant. It's an organism. It changes. So by us trying to put this into a box, it's not going to be the same. That's why we manipulate the ingredients that are in the plant. If I want to have a one-to-one with just linalool and beta caryophyllene and terpinolene, and I can create that product. To me, that becomes an API pharmaceutical grade product because it has consistency, it has an associated result, and you're doing it as a safe pharmaceutical grade product with multiple ingredients in that. That can be something that's therapeutic along the way. But if right now, going into the dispensary, having a bud tender tell you it's going to take care of your aches and pains, it's going to help you sleep and all that stuff, maybe or maybe not. CBN doesn't work for me the same way, which is a derivative of deterioration of THC, Delta 9. It's another cannabinoid. It's supposed to be sedative. It's not for me, but it may be for you. And that's why the experience it becomes extremely personal. So I believe the industry itself needs to get ourselves together and stop looking at THC as a measure of quality. Just because something has more THC doesn't mean it's better for you. Just because something has more THC versus another product has less THC, but they're both the same price, you think you're getting a deal, you may not be. Because I remember when we were cultivating, we had this Gorilla Glue chemical variety, Gorilla Glue number 4, that had maybe 15, 16% THC, but man, it was beautifully expressed. Every single aspect of the plant was cultivated well, but also cured perfectly, or expressed what its true potential is. And we were selling it wholesale, and people were coming to us and saying, "Oh man, do you have any more of this? This is great." And it's like, "How much THC is in there?" I was like, 16%. No, 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 no. What do you mean? I'm like, "Yeah, 16%." Well, why is it so good? Well, because it's reached its true potential. You cultivate it correctly and it matches with the person and it gives you just enough of everything that this individual may need instead of 37% THC, where it can activate that anxiety in some people. It can actually make some people more sedative. It depends on the individual. But I would say that it's personalized medicine like anything else. For some people this, for some people that, but we need to really look at the safety of cannabis before we actually put it into our bodies with all these different concentrates. And Pennsylvania is a medical state, so it needs to be better. One of the challenges is the people that are making decisions don't really understand the plan to begin with. And then the people are sitting in the boardrooms, and I've sat in these boardrooms, some of them never even consumed the plant to begin with. So they don't even understand what this plant actually does and what it's about. And this is the thing that we need to integrate our boardrooms with having people that are scientists, doctors, but are actually business people, and actually people that understand the endocannabinoid system and understand what the plant does and collaborate. We used to have a very friendly, collaborative kind of environment among people in the cannabis business. Well, that changed a lot. We still get together at different conferences, hug it out and all that stuff. But with the infusion of the capital that this industry has reached, that's where some of the challenges fall in. That's the suits and the beards sitting next together to each other sometimes don't get along that well.
You don't want a cannabis industry
Yeah.
where you have, like, again, we can name all kinds of brands and stuff, but you know that, hey, if that's the brand, I'm not buying it. I've tried it. I've tried to believe in it. It wasn't working, and I'm moving on. Right.
Yeah.
So that idea of personalized medicine is the future, and I think we talked about it. I've connected you with at least one regenerative doctor, and I think you're probably, is it on your menu soon to go to the next A4M event in Vegas?
Yeah,
Yeah.
we'll be at
Oh
A4M.
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Right, well, that same person will be there, so you can do your proposals in person. So, like, bridging those connections and making things happen. A lot of times it happens in person, right? Because when we set up like our Zooms and we never met before, like I've had a closeness with you since you were a KW commercial, right? And then just nourishing that relationship and talking every so often, it leads to some breakthroughs. And I think in life, as long as, like, I love seeing other people win. It takes nothing from me to give you a gigantic win and be like, I'm happy you got that. I'm happy you
Yeah.
proved it to somebody, that I could just point you to one person or two people and be like, talk to them, talk to you. Like, that the best of you and the best of somebody else could create an even better symphony and harmony, where you can take the good work that you do and bring it to someone's practice, because you've
Yeah.
legitimized what in a lot of places is seen as binary, that you cannot, and some people and let's dispel the notion, if you would, in the best way you can, that you can be a high performer and perform on cannabis, because it worked for people like Genghis Khan to conquer a whole region.
What about Elon Musk? He's the richest man
There
in the
you
world. I
go.
mean,
There you
he's
go.
a cannabis
When you saw him
consumer.
light up on the Rogans, right? What was your reaction?
It's like, yes, cool, man, and keep doing that and make it public, because I know so many people that consume cannabis, like, but the challenge is that I had a director on my show, and I was talking about Hollywood. I live Hollywood adjacent, and it's interesting because when you go to events, celebrity parties, and all that stuff, which I don't do that often, but once in a while I get an invite. You'd be surprised at how many people consume cannabis and who's actually calling people, let's go outside and smoke. I have this, this, and this. But then when you watch the shows and the movies, it's not reflective of the reality of the world, because they're still pouring themselves a drink of whiskey, and not saying that doesn't occur as well, but represent the truth. And getting over the stigma is shedding a light through real TV shows, movies, all these different things, what people really do. And once you do that, and they do it in a joking way. Oh yeah, we took a bunch of edibles. I just watched a show. Yeah, that's fun and sometimes not fun for people. But there is a lot of people at social gatherings that don't drink as much, drink some non-alcoholic beverages, and consume cannabis. And it's done all the time. And this is where I think we need to go as a society, to be honest with ourselves, to reflect on what the real world is, to put it into movies, shows, with cautions as well, real cautions, like any other substance, any other drug, but keep it real. And we don't keep it real. And that's one of the ways that we can get over that stigma. And I appreciate the whole thing of connection, right? And staying, and I appreciate you and all the work you've done to help me also get the word out, including using your platform. I just think it's extremely important. And people, we get caught up in our day to day, and picking up the phone, sending a text, having this connection with an individual, this is what makes the world revolve, and not being divisive. Find that common ground. We have like a freeway that's going between the left and the right and all the stuff that's going on. Instead of finding what divides us, find what connects us, and then let's smoke the peace pipe together.
You're almost speaking in alignment here. I'm like that peace pipe idea has been sitting in my head like the whole interview. Like I imagine like the natives did, right? People throughout history. You talk about Kush, that's Indica, that's India, right? With the letter C for cannabis, right? And then when people are new to this, right? Would you mind going over just briefly or as much as you'd like the difference between your sativas and your indicas and how they're not always just always binary. And then there's the place where there's hybrids. Where try to explain that for people who don't know what that is.
Yeah, so you brought up like Kush. So originally there were something called land race strains. So land race strains were originated in a certain region or a certain part of the world, and the original indica chemical varieties originated in around like the Kashmir region of India, Pakistan, in that region. And they had, if you look at those plants originally, they were lower to the ground, they were thicker, they were wider, and they produced a different smell, diesely, skunky type of smell. From what my research and what I read was that the plant under stress, because four season climate, harsh conditions, the plant under stress had itself evolved to, first of all, to create, be a shorter plant, thicker stalks, so it can avoid the mother nature. And the other thing is the smell, the terpene profiles, the essential oils it gave off were supposed to repel the predators that were natural to that specific region. So that's why it expressed that. So the sativa dominant strains, and if you look at them, and I'll explain the smell, the diesely skunky smell, it's very prominent with a terpene profile essential called myrcene. Myrcene is sedative. So if you look at the indica, and it has a lot of the myrcene in it, terpenoline as well, but mostly myrcene, you can smell the skunky diesely smell, and that's usually sedative. The other varietals, like the Durban or the Mauis, they grew in a completely different climate. In South Africa and Durban, and they stretch thinner stalk, much taller. They stretch the sun. Same thing with the Maui chemical varieties. They stretch the sun. They have a different smell to them. They have a different look to them because they don't have to put up with the harshness of climate, that islandy type of smell. They have even a fruity type of smell. And one of the prominent terpenes are limonene, also pinene. Limonene has a fruity, like citrusy type of smell, and that has an association with some dopamine producing. So it actually gives you a lift up. Those are sativa landrace chemical varieties. Now, what happened is we started crossing everything. And the reason why we started crossing was one of the ways to see what we can do, because cannabis people like to experiment, even though we're supposed to be stoners and dumb, but some of the smartest people in the world that I've ever met are cannabis, not only consumers, but people who work with plants and all this stuff. It's incredible what this industry has been able to achieve. Brilliant people. And this, so by crossing that and trying to breed out certain traits and breed in higher THC, etc., we lost that. So the terpene profile determines whether it's leaning more indica, leaning more sativa. So if you have a hybrid that's high in limonene, pinene, it'll be sativa dominant with some myrcene. If it's the opposite, it'll be more on the hybrid of the indica side, more sedative. Having said all that, for some people it works. It doesn't work the same way. Some people, for the most part, it's pretty much. But for some people, I remember there was a guy that worked in my dispensary back in the day, and he wanted to smoke some weed, and he was like, "Hey, can I consume some cannabis?" Yeah, sure. I have this sativa dominant hybrid over here. He goes, no, that puts me to sleep. I'm like, no, it's sativa. He goes, not for me, man. Every single time I consume anything that's sativa dominant, it puts me to sleep. So it doesn't work for everybody the same way, but it's a good indicator. Those essential oils with the cannabinoids together, they determine what the effect of the plant should be based on your own endocannabinoid system. But it's those sedative ones versus the ones that give you that boost up, GABA connecting, dopamine connecting, etc. And one of the terpene profiles called beta caryophyllene, actually through a study, has been shown to help lessen inflammation. So it has an affinity for the CB2 receptor, the only one, and it's found in clove and black pepper as well. And it helps to reduce that inflammation while maybe the THC is working as an analgesic and helping to reduce the feeling of the pain.
Wow. I mean, it's tremendous that one plant can do so much, and it is medicine, and obviously, just like I think Aristotle said that all things in moderation, and the difference between medicine and poison is the dosage. And I think you shared a few weeks ago an article that said that I think you mentioned earlier in our talk that an excess could cause paranoia, psychosis. Speak into that, because there's a part where you say, yeah, that makes sense, and then also like not to scare people that it will automatically cause it for everyone.
Yeah, psychosis, psychosomatic effects does happen in some people who are genetically predisposed to that. Cannabis is not the only thing that can trigger that. It can trigger that in many people. But we did a study at Wayne State, studies this dysregulation and PTSD in urban adolescents, association with an anandamide concentration and Fa genotype. So what that means is, in reading the study, it's been published on PubMed. Reading the study, adolescents that have predispositions to PTSD and stress reactivity, if they have that and they take the same dose of phytocannabinoid THC that a person that doesn't have the genetic predisposition, that can trigger the expression of their anxiety and PTSD. So it's what I was saying before. Fa, fatty acid amide hydrolase, produces an enzyme that metabolizes anandamide, which is, as I mentioned earlier, the byproduct of our endogenous endocannabinoid system. So if you're not producing enough anandamide because you're breaking it down much quicker, you can subsidize with the plant. The issue is by taking too much THC, instead of subsidizing, it actually does the opposite. It triggers that stress reactivity and PTSD in individuals. So yes, we have to know what we're genetically predisposed to. Yes, we have to find the right dose that fits us. And yes, we have to find the right formulation of cannabinoids and terpenes that align more with our neurochemistry and avoid the things that may be out of the scope of alignment for us.
In researching all this, like I feel it's more like the more you learn, the more you don't know.
There's so much research that we have on cannabis. The challenge is that human clinical trials have been minuscule in the space for many different reasons. So maybe the government didn't want it, there are legalities, you have to get a DA license, all those different things. So the best research that we have is anecdotal evidence from companies like us and other companies that are actually getting feedback from humans on what the efficacy and adverse effects are. So we should always be learning. We should always be studying. We're complex as human beings. The plant is complex. So over 400 different components of the plant. We only identified maybe less than 100. So we have a bunch of unknown molecules that are in this plant. And there's an Israeli scientist named David Miri. They call him Dedi. He's doing cancer research on cannabis. Has found apoptosis works on different people with different cancers. But the way that, and there's a video, anybody can go on YouTube and look up David Miri, and he's got, I think it's like 4 petri dishes with 4 different cancers. He puts a chemical variety of cannabis in those petri dishes. For some, it's actually creating apoptosis, cell death. It's creating cell death for that cancer. For other ones, it's not doing anything. For another one, it's actually increasing. So finding what works for the individual for the right cancer, it actually is able to get that accelerated. With AI, now we can do this much better. Instead of doing the research, you use AI to make predictive inferences. And now that AI can say, well, you know what? There was 100 cancer patients with similar genetics that took this protocol, and this is what's going to work for you. So this is the future. The future of medicine is very bright if we can use machine learning and AI to really personalize the experience and scale it quickly before we have to go and disseminate this to 1 million people. The machine learning can actually make the prediction of how it would affect those 1 million people.
Wow. So, I mean, think of just the cost of having any level of clinical study is tremendous, even on a small scale. Like if it was 300 people, and then to extrapolate the work you do over a larger population, not only proves the efficacy of what you're doing, but just makes your point all the better and stronger. Because I wanted to speak to like where you see the future of your work in this field, like going forward next year, 5 years, 10 years, the rest of your
Yeah.
career.
So the future of our work is it's precision health and wellness. It is using AI to, as we call, chat with your DNA. So not ordering a report for your endocannabinoid system or your menopause biotype, but being able to get your whole genome. A healthcare professional can pull up and say, show me all the inflammation markers, cross-reference it with any of the disease markers, and show me metabolic function on the fly. And then you'll have your own genetic profile specifically to the individual based and a protocol that is specific to that individual that's done in seconds. And that's the way we're going to be able to really shift the way healthcare is done. And hopefully my company is going to be a major contributor in the space, because that's the real future. And that's where I see maybe, and we're participating in clinical trials as well. Maybe there'll be, to amplify our message, maybe it needs to come through a merger of somebody else who also is a big player in the space, and they can help us bridge some of the weaknesses that our company has versus others. So sometimes we're stronger as a unit. But I really believe that the next frontier is precision health and wellness through lifespan and health span optimization. And this is, you mentioned A4M, that's what we're going for. I go to learn more than anything because I love to see what's going on in the space of longevity, what's going on with optimization as an individual, quote unquote, biohacking. And that's what I really believe. We're a big player in this space. We're not the best at marketing ourselves, like Grant Cardone with the 10X program and all that other stuff. Wonderful. Let everybody come out and say that. But I really believe the next frontier is that health span frontier. How can we live longer, healthier lives? And then what can we do to optimize ourselves for that?
It's about the life in our years rather than
Yeah.
just the years in our life. When a lot of people say, "Oh, have that goal to be 100," but yeah, cognizant with it, funny, laughing, just enjoying yourself, right? Being able to walk and be there with your family, your kids, your grandkids, and those that you care about. When you said earlier about Tower Records, I bought my, I went, it was the Welsh, the one that was at like Welsh and the Boulevard. I don't know if
Yeah.
you worked at the one downtown or the one.
No, that's the one I worked at.
Oh, cool. Well,
The
you weren't there. You
Northeast
weren't there
Philly
when I
Tower.
got my, when I asked somebody else, I guess, maybe in the 90s, I'm like, which Bob Dylan album should I get first? Because there's so many.
Yeah.
And then I'm like, oh, you got to get this one because it's all around the watchtower. I'm like, no, that's a Hendrix song. No, he wrote it first.
Yeah.
Right, then to quote another song from Dylan, from My Back Pages, I was so much older then. I'm younger than that now. So I love the humility and grace that you offer, knowing that you're always a hungry, happy student, going to these events and deferring to the masters who are experts in their respective fields and have something to share with you. So going back to that old, like, iron sharpens iron, like you don't come out of these events smaller. You've expanded yourself, your circle, your network. And I urge all people to find a conference that speaks to you and go out there, wherever it is, right? And A4M specifically is, go into it and how long you've been attending these A4M or other type of medical type events, and just how it's magnified and multiplied your work and your quality of life.
I hate to study. I love to learn. So sitting down and reading books and textbooks and studies, like, my mind drifts. Being able to watch somebody make a presentation that's interesting, show me how it works, that's stimulating to me. I listen, I watch, and I learn. And also, I've spoken at conferences all over the world. Sometimes you get to a point where you're there to present, and it's all about you, and you create this environment because you have to get yourself ready to speak on stage, do a keynote and all that other stuff. And then after you're done, but you forget to take advantage of what other people are presenting. So just having that level of humility and curiosity, I think, can lend to yourself better positioning for growth. To me, people ask us purpose of why we're even here. Like, for me, it's been growth. Like, you got to grow, take that information and contribute. And that's the only way we're growing, because we're trying to learn and take in as much stuff as you possibly can. What good is it if you're taking that and keeping it? You have to share that with other people. And that's how you help other people grow. And so that's my mission in life.
So it's more like the open hand, right? It is willing to receive and give, where the closed fist is very restrictive. And going in there and taking some knowledge and saying, okay, this is just for me, and I'm going to monetize it and take it to the moon. It doesn't work that way.
I agree.
So, Len, thank you so much. The word mensch gets overused a lot, but I feel like if you didn't know what to write on your tombstone one day, I would say he was a mensch. And how
Okay,
would you
I'll
like
take
to
it.
be remembered?
I don't I don't really care. I
There's
just
no attachment at all. You surrendered
No,
that
because
too.
I'm not here anymore. I don't know what's going to happen in next life. I want to be remembered this way. I want to make a contribution in the world. I want my family, my kids, to, if people stop in the street, I don't want them to say, "Oh, your dad was like Bernie Madoff. He ripped us off," and all that stuff. No, I want them to say, your dad made a positive impact in my life. I want my family, my kids, to be able to have the legacy. I think Mike Tyson was interviewed about legacy. And he said, "I don't give a fuck about legacy, man. I'm going to be dead. I don't give a shit about that. It's a construct. It doesn't mean anything to me. I'm here now. What does that mean?" So I thought about that. I'm like, yeah, why do I care? But I care because of the next generation that comes after me. And I want them to be able to proudly stand on my shoulders, create their own lives and all that other stuff, but stand on my shoulders and what I was able to provide as a baseline for them to hopefully. I'm going to outlive my parents. So I was going to say my parents to be proud and everybody else. But yeah, I would like to leave a positive impact on this world when I'm not here. I'm not going to experience it, but hopefully the world is going to be able to get something out of that. And my family will, other people will say, okay, that's Len's. There was some sort of positive effect that I had on their life.
Well, I think the shine, at least the shine and the brilliance that you exhibit as a leader, as a visionary, and a true connector of good things and good people, I think that leads to an inspiration that others can mirror and mimic in their own way. And for all of us, being open and vulnerable about any of the hardships, difficulties, and challenges that we've overcome in life make it a little bit easier for that other person who's currently in a low state, currently saying, you know what, I'm where he used to be or where Demetri used to be. And hey, it does get better. Hey, you're able to get the work done and integrate plant medicine in a responsible, methodical, and clinical type way to get you out of disease and into ease,
Yeah.
offering you a sense of relief. So I'm really happy for our time together. How can people find you, your show, and order the work that you do?
Yeah. So our website is EndoDNA. It's ENDODNA.com, EndoDNA. My one-on-one quote unquote coaching is Len May, LenMay, LenMayCoaching.com. My my podcast is called Everything is Personal, and you can get that everywhere from wherever you listen to podcasts. I know Apple, Spotify. There's a YouTube version with video as well. My book is called Making Cannabis Personal. You can get that on Amazon or wherever you get books. And yeah, I'm around on social. Len May, Len May DNA, I think on IG, but I'm pretty active on certain platforms, including LinkedIn. So yeah, reach out.
Thank you so much. One last thing, share more about what inspired you to create your podcast and maybe highlight an aha moment or a breakthrough that happened as a result of one of your episodes.
What inspired me is I was being interviewed by a guy who is an editor in chief of Entrepreneur Magazine's cannabis version called Green Entrepreneur, and we were talking, and we hit it off. Personally, it was like a 20-minute interview, and then we ended up talking for a while, and we found out that we're like East Coast Jews that love old school hip hop that live in LA. And I brought up like one day Schoolie D, and he's like, "Oh, I know Schoolie D." I'm like, "Schoolie D, great, Philly, old school kind of stuff." And during COVID, he was producing like podcasts. He's like, "You should do a podcast." I'm like, I'm not sure I want to do that. What would we do? He's like, "Oh, the shit that we talk about on the phone or whatever, like the hip hop or whatever. When I talk music." So I said, "I'll do it if you do it with me." So he did it with me. He was producing the pod, and then he needed to do his own thing, and I decided to keep doing it. So I just completed my 208th episode, and what I do the show for is I love people's stories. I love interesting stories. I call it Everything is Personal because it just is. And for people to be able to share with me their personal stories of being able to overcome obstacles, succeed, whatever success means to you, that personal story is so inspiring to me. I'm a huge fan of biographies, autobiographies, and biographies of people's stories. That's why I always ask. So what I learned from people, there's a couple of questions that I ask my guests. One of them is about music, like if you can only listen to 5 albums, what would those 5 albums be? And it's so interesting to get so many the wide responses from people, and some music that I wouldn't expect just by having a conversation that they would be into. So that one thing that's interesting. The other thing is I always ask people to describe what the room looked like growing up, and they see the nostalgia come back in their eyes. I'm like, I had a poster of Farrah Fawcett, or my carpet was blue shag, or all that stuff. That's really interesting to hear as well. But it's the ability to overcome. So my episode is being launched today. I had, if anybody's a Prince fan, and they saw Purple Rain or any movies, you can see in Prince's band, starting with The Revolution, there was a guy who's dressed in scrubs playing the keyboards, Dr. Fink. He was in every Prince video, every movie, everywhere. He was dressed in scrubs. He's a big contributor. So I had Matt Fink on my podcast. And to learn inside stories about Prince, I could have talked to this guy for 5 hours, man. It was just such an amazing conversation. He was so generous with his time, his contribution, all the different things. So those are kind of things that I find fascinating. I learn from. So
Let me answer the 5 albums question then. Okay, I'm ready. Harrison.
So hold on. This
All
is
right,
the question though.
sure. Okay.
If you could listen to 5 albums for the next year, you don't have to remember the name of the actual album. It could be Prince, whatever. But what would be those 5 albums?
Okay. So I would be All Things Must Pass, and Brainwashed from George Harrison.
Mm-hmm.
It would be the 30th anniversary album for Bob Dylan's Celebration in 93. I'd also include from Dylan Nashville Skyline, because it was his only country album. And the album that had his reggae song, I and I.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's probably the single best reggae song I've ever heard. And it wasn't from a reggae artist. And I'm not sure if that's 5, but
That's
if
4.
that's 4. All right. So Brian Adams.
Okay.
Just because
That
we all bought
cuts
that.
like
And
a knife.
it was like,
That's
I
good.
gotta run to you. It's like
Yeah.
it's just a charged up thing. But you mentioned Prince, right? And
Yeah.
just a quick aside, when the George Harrison Memorial Concert,
Yeah.
when he jumped on stage, right? And he was this short little guy, but boy, he had power. He had pep, right? And he's doing his guitar solo while my guitar gently weeps.
Mm-hmm.
I'm still gonna listen to that as often as possible, right?
Yeah.
That solo, he's feeling it. You're feeling each note, just the way George would do it. And you have George's son in the background, Danny, just like a kid in the candy store. Like, I can't believe I'm witnessing this.
They were all looking at him. Petty was looking at him. Jeff Lynne, everybody was looking at him like, holy shit, I can't believe what we're hearing. It was a magical moment.
He's full electric, and then he's leaning back. It's almost like it's theatrical. He's musical. He's grooving, and this guy's behind him, catching him, pushing him right back on stage. He throws the guitar in the air. I'm like, what is this? Like, what is this? And like, you're sitting there thinking, like, all right, you got it from one perspective. I'm like, wait, because you knew that Harrison, you knew his music from like one note. You knew that where it was going. So you knew when he played in the style of Harrison, you're like, this is artistic genius in action. That you could just take somebody else's work and then truly make it yours. Just like All Along the Watchtower, right? A song so good, when Hendrix redid it, Dylan's like, this ain't my song no more.
Yeah.
Right?
True.
So I love that music can tie us together, bring people across the world together. Like, I don't know about you, but I love Greek music, right? And last week there was this singer, Glikeria, who actually has sung in Israel, right? And there's some Greek artists over time have performed there because in our region, like, music brings us together. It brings joy, it brings passion, it brings tragedy, everything together. And if you can just be joyous and dance, and you want primal music, Cretan music with the lyra and the uti and all this stuff, boom, 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 boom. That's hip hop, right? So it's funny, like, you talk about being East Coast Jewish kid. I grew up in basically a Jewish public high school, Lower Moreland. Okay, and at 12 years old, they're like, with a name like Demetri, they think you're Russian, right? And they think you're of a Jewish background. So they said, Demetri, when are you going to have your bar mitzvah? I'm not going to have a bar mitzvah. What do you mean? How come? I'm not Jewish. Yeah, nothing wrong with it, but just because I'm in this environment, right? And then you go,
I just have a bar mitzvah anyway. Who cares? It's fun.
right, you know what? I didn't know if they would have to cut me again.
No, you're good.
Anyway, I love that you could just riff, go in different places, and expand our horizon. So I really want to honor what you do, and thank you again for being a great guest. I've been looking forward to this episode ever since I started the show.
I
And the
appreciate
fact
it,
that
brother. Thank
you
you.
messaged me yesterday, Happy Thanksgiving, and I said, by chance, are you available? And you said, yeah. I'm like, yes. Like, be in the moment. So thanks again, May. And any closing words?
No, man, I just think that you said it. Music is a huge connector. I'm a very, very big music person. I enjoy listening to vinyl still. I love the crackle of the vinyl needle. I think that's, if anything can be taken away, it's this whole notion of connection. 99.9% of us are identical. It's that 0.1% that makes a difference. Oh, that's all we have to focus on. It's only that 0.1%, which is minuscule in the universe. We're all related. There is no such thing as these people from here. We're all related. You mentioned Genghis Khan. He conquered half of the world. His seed is in a lot of us. Same thing with Alexander the Great and a lot of the different conquerors. So we're all interconnected and we're all related. And we got to start treating ourselves, each other, as cousins and family members instead of this division. So that's what I would leave with.
Wow. And I'll just close on it. Remember that speech? I don't know who Tyson defeated when he gave that Alexander speech. Do you remember that one, or by chance?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
He says,
Yeah.
"Hey, was that Jim Gray asked him, was that the shortest fight you ever fought, Mike?"
Yeah.
I don't know. Whatever. He's giving praise to, and all that. He says, "I had to bury my best friend, and I wasn't going to even fight this fight. But, Lennox Lewis, I'm coming for you." He says, "You're no conqueror. I'm a conqueror. He's no Alexander. I'm Alexander. I'm cut from that cloth. He's no Sonny Liston. I'm Sonny Liston. I'm cut from Jack Dempsey's cloth. Oh, boom, boom, boom. And I'm gonna eat his children." Whoa. Yeah. Like, dang. Like, this is one of the biggest, oddest, borderline psychotic pep talks I've ever heard. And it came from the same person who now is a mellow, stoic, philosophical master. So I love that these symphonies in life can take us through the four seasons, not just a hotel, but of all these best work. Yeah. And that we can relate in a multiple way, whether it be through jazz, blues, rock, any genre. There's something that just feels right to us in our heart. Yeah. And then when we're in a place of stress, reaching out to music, for me, even playing music, like it brings you some harmony and peace and relief. So any album recommendations of anything that you've heard lately, because you love music. And
I've been listening to Slash's new blues album. I think it's fantastic. If anybody's a real blues head, that album, man, he's got so many wonderful players on that album with him. I highly recommend that. Let me see. There's a group out of, I think they're out of Scotland. I may be wrong. Called High Fade Funk Band. Man, super, super funky. I highly recommend them. Let me see what else. I just saw a band called the Grey Boy All Stars. The sax player, also funk, like really, really cool driven music. I think that's sufficient as recommendations.
Beautiful. When you go on blues, like I've dig into like Blind Lemon Jefferson, of course the work of Lead Belly, but I wouldn't even know about Lead Belly if Nirvana didn't cover Where Did You Sleep Last Night.
Yeah.
Well, all right, man. So God bless, and thanks for tuning in for another episode of the Relief Podcast, where Len May was our beautiful guest. Thank you so much.
Appreciate it.